Hello and welcome to Mississippi Insight. I'm Byron Brown. Thank you for joining us. This Sunday is House Speaker Philip Gunn preparing to run against Tate Reeves. Fresh reporting from our partners at MississippiToday.org suggests a developing primary battle among Republicans in 2023. Mississippi Today's Geoff Pender joins us with his latest reporting on the gubernatorial outlook. Also ahead, housing prices are sky high. Great news for sellers, but what about home buyers? How does this impact renters? And is Mississippi's housing market healthy or in need of a reset? We'll have analysis this morning. We begin this morning with journalist Geoff Pender. Geoff is senior political reporter for our partners at MississippiToday.org. He joins us now by Zoom to talk about his reporting on the developing race for governor in 2023. Geoff, welcome back to Mississippi Insight. Geoff, I want to start with a soundbite from Speaker Gunn himself. 12 News' Tal Toss spoke with him on Thursday during a ribbon-cutting event in Pearl. Shortly after your report was published that morning, Tal asked him for comment on your report about his potential run for governor. Here's what he had to say.
I'm honored to serve where I am right now. I have a job to do as a Speaker of the House. I'm traveling the state trying to get our income tax plan passed. And so I'm just focused on doing the things that serving where I am and focused on trying to make sure that I do the job well that I've been hired to do right now.
I will note, just like the comment he gave me, he did not emphatically say he's not considering a run, but actually, yeah, the talk among a lot of political types around the Capitol, around the state, has been that he appears to be doing everything someone would do if they were considering a run. He's obviously, it appears, stepped up fundraising to the point he's about to have about $1 million in the bank. He's been touring the state on what would almost appear to be a campaign whistle stop type tour. And anyway, yeah, a lot of noise about that, about a potential run from him.
What do you believe is driving the support that you're seeing for a possible Gunn candidacy in 2023?
I think, as I understand, Gunn is hearing from a lot of folks that might potentially want to change, that there might be some dissatisfaction. Reeves says Reeves inherited a tough time. He's had some detractors, and he has a history as lieutenant governor for a long time and everything too. And yeah, there's not perhaps quite the unity there would normally be with an incumbent Republican among the Republican Party and the Republican movers and shakers across the state. So I think Gunn is hearing a good bit of encouragement to try a run. But it should be said, look, unseating an incumbent, especially sitting Republican incumbent, is no easy task. It rarely happens. So, Gunn's, my guess is Gunn's more in the testing of the waters point right now. I think, as I said in my article, he's probably trying to figure out if it's a fool's errand or real opportunity. So I think he's probably still got a ways to go before he convinces himself one way or the other.
You also spoke with former Mississippi Chief Justice Bill Waller, Jr. What do you have to say about the possible run by Gunn and his own ambitions for running for governor again?
Yeah, he said, and I quote, "I'm considering it, and we're still not decided yet." So he's certainly not ruled out another run himself. He spoke pretty highly of Speaker Gunn as a potential candidate, and spoke not so highly about incumbent Governor Reeves. Obviously, no love lost there. So, yeah, regardless, we may see an interesting Republican primary in 2023 for governor, if not an interesting general election. I don't know what might be in store there.
And we're almost 2 years away from our next gubernatorial elections. Is Tate Reeves, the sitting governor, is he really vulnerable for a potential challenge?
Again, I don't know if you would say vulnerable. And like I said, look, unsitting an incumbent is difficult, period. unless there are just some really unusual circumstances. But, you know, we've had some unusual circumstances within the last year or so. And, you know, how vulnerable he might be, there's been some recent polling that showed him with some relatively low approval ratings, but he's also relatively okay with the Republican, appears to be okay with the Republican base. So, you know, no one's claiming that he's just ultra open to a challenge right now.
So what's it do with the relationship moving forward as they try to work over the next couple of years to get things done in the legislature?
Yeah, that's probably going to be very interesting. And look, that relationship between the legislature and the executive branch has not been really cheerful and rosy to begin with. So, yeah, whether this has a major chilling effect on what's already not the best of relationships, that remains to be seen. But that's probably very likely.
You think they'll be able to get things done when it comes to things like infrastructure and some other things that they want to get done in the state?
I don't know. Again, that remains to be seen. You know, as far as the governor, lieutenant governor, and speaker getting together on some major issues, I mean, they've struggled with that despite all hailing from the same party. There have been some issues there. They've appeared to be definitely not in step on some major issues of taxation and some various others. So, you know, don't know that any, you know, 2023 political ambitions would certainly probably not help that relationship. But we shall see.
And we haven't even mentioned the prospects of a Democratic contender for the governor's race. So what do you see there, and who's likely a possible candidate for Democrats to jump in on all of this?
That's a big question, and as you guys probably noticed, I mean, there doesn't appear to be any clear heir apparent to the Democratic nomination for governor. Don't know the answer to that. Not seeing anybody really, at least this far out, making any moves there. So I don't know what kind of a challenge the Democratic Party is going to make in some of the top tier races.
And when you going back to the House Speaker, he's already has about $1 million in his coffers. How much would he need if he was going to take a serious challenge against the governor?
I think the conventional wisdom would be that he would need $3 to $4 million for a primary to make a serious primary challenge. You mentioned former Justice Waller. In his challenge last year, he got a late start. He got a late start fundraising. Ended up with $1.5 million or so, and just really wasn't that well funded for the challenge. So I think Gunn, if he were to make this run, would know that he's going to have to do a lot better than that. Obviously, Reeves is known for his fundraising prowess, expertise. So one could guarantee he will be well funded. So anyone seriously challenging him in a primary would have to come up with $3 to $4 million to just to be at the table.
All right, Geoff Pender, MississippiToday.org. Interesting times coming up as we get back into the political season with what might happen here in Mississippi. Thank you, Geoff.
Thanks, Byron.
All right. That ribbon cutting we mentioned was at Mississippi's Center for Violence Prevention. They are celebrating a big expansion in its program to combat human trafficking. 12 News' Tal Ta has more on that program.
Human trafficking is a growing problem nationwide and locally in the Magnolia State.
So there's more work to be done, and it is a sad reality that exists around this state.
A sad reality that city and state leaders recognize since it started the Center for Violence Prevention's tower, considered a safe haven, now doubling its space to accommodate up to 12 victims of human trafficking and their children. In addition, the tower programs rapid response team responsible for responding to individuals suspected of human trafficking. Officials say traffickers use drugs as bait
Human trafficking, sex trafficking is hugely profitable, and one of the reasons is because in order to traffic drugs and guns, you always have to have a new supply.
In a lot of instances, it's people trafficking their own family members, and it can be a hard cycle to break.
We don't always win all of them. Some of them go right back because it is such a tremendous brainwashing.
House Speaker Philip Gunn championed the issue, passing prior legislation to protect the most vulnerable.
Just have a passion for trying to end human trafficking in Mississippi.
The message from Attorney General Lynn Fitch.
We're going to end this in our state. Don't come here if you're going to participate in human trafficking.
We don't need to stop. We need to continue the fight.
In the Road to Recovery for Human Trafficking Survivors, the Tower program in Mississippi provides shelter for up to 2 years.
Welcome back. The National Association of Realtors found that the median sales price for existing homes rose 23.6% in May. You don't need us to tell you that housing prices are sky high. A few calls around town and a well-placed search online will tell you that even here in Mississippi, the sales tag on real estate is way up. So what's going on here, and how does that pricey market impact buyers, not to mention renters? Well, joining us now by Zoom is George Ratiu. He is senior economist with Realtor.com. That commercial website offers sales listings and real estate analysis to the consumer. George, thank you for joining us for Mississippi Insight this morning.
Absolutely. A real pleasure being together with you.
George, talk to us about the prices in the residential housing market right now, and especially any local or regional trends that you are seeing.
So real estate markets have really taken off. We are really at the tail end of a pandemic, which has dramatically reshaped how we collectively relate to our homes. Because we want bigger homes in suburban markets with more space, we have obviously all flocked to these markets. And what ended up happening, there was not enough inventory. And as you pointed out so well, prices have been up by double digits. And based on Realtor.com data, they've done that increase for 11 months now. And when we look at Mississippi markets, that is no different, whether it's Jackson, Hattiesburg, Biloxi, Gulfport area. Prices are significantly higher. In fact, in many cases, double-digit higher. And so for many buyers, this has been a really challenging period. On one hand, they have low interest rates, so they've tried to take good advantage of it. On the other hand, of course, with not enough inventory, there's increased competition and, of course, a lot of frustrated buyers trying to contend with multiple bid offers, price escalation clauses, contingency waivers, and so on.
What are the big factors beyond this that are causing the prices to go up?
So it's important to keep in mind that when we look at population growth, real estate is benefiting from a tremendous demographic tailwind. We have the millennial generation, the youngest and largest in the history of the U.S., coming of age. 5 million roughly are turning 30 every year for the next 5 years. That's tremendous demand. At the other side of the equation, however, we have a construction industry which has underbuilt for over a decade. We are, by our calculations, about 4 million homes short of where we should be given this tremendous demand. So not surprisingly, this is putting a lot of pressure on prices, as many of these young millennials are starting families, having kids, and are obviously looking for a home of their own.
What about the price, the cost of lumber right now and to build? Is that having an impact on where the prices are today too as well?
Absolutely. We saw lumber mills being caught flat-footed. As a result of the pandemic last year and the economic recession, many of them throttled back, and they got surprised when demand for lumber and, of course, other building materials skyrocketed. In fact, for many home builders, there's just not enough time in a day or even materials to keep up with demand. And with the price of lumber, skyrocketing, builders had to finally pass a lot of these rising costs onto consumers. And so consumers themselves are contending right now with roughly on median across the country about $36,000 to $40,000 more for a new home. That obviously is putting a lot of pressure. And we saw that this week. New home sales and existing home sales took a step back this week as a lot of buyers are finding these prices a little disorienting.
Explain how the COVID-19 pandemic factors into all this in the sense of prices. A lot of people were out of work, but how are people still able to buy if some people lost their jobs?
So the real key to the rebound in real estate markets this last year has been remote work. This is something that you may remember the internet sort of implicitly promised back in the 1990s, mid-1990s, that someday we'll be able to work from anywhere, including the proverbial beach. Well, it turns out 2020 was that day. And so a lot of Americans were able to hang on to their jobs, and not only that, but actually thrive, which has helped many of them, especially when you consider they've had no commutes, no dry cleaning bills, no eating out for practically a year, has allowed a lot of them to save quite a bit of money. So a lot of these folks have actually gone out there and looked for homes. Moreover, and this is important, we surveyed Americans across the country at Realtor.com and found out that a majority of Americans today prefer remote work. So I see a hybrid model continuing to dominate the landscape. And that means that homes with home offices and more flexible space will continue to be very in demand for the remainder of this year.
And we'll have more with George Ratiu on housing prices with Mississippi Insight continues. So those who might have been renting now want a bigger place in the place of their own now to buy?
So rental market saw a tremendous hit, particularly in urban downtowns. Think in New York, think Los Angeles, San Francisco last year, as a lot of young people fled during the early stages of the pandemic. However, based on our data we've been tracking, we're seeing rental demand rebound even in those centers. What's interesting, however, most renters are actually looking for more space. We're seeing rental rates grow at the fastest pace for 2 bedrooms or higher, a clear sign that even in the rental space right now, the search for more space is on. And what's interesting to me, particularly for markets like Jackson, Hattiesburg, and other Mississippi markets, there's a tremendous cross-state migration taking place right now. With people searching for affordability and more space, a lot of buyers and renters are relocating to Mississippi markets. In fact, based on Realtor.com data, both Jackson and Hattiesburg have seen rates of 36 to 46% in terms of local market demand come from out of state. And if you're wondering where those folks are coming from, well, Atlanta, New Orleans, Dallas, New York, Chicago are very much the kind of metros where people are relocating to Mississippi from. Not surprisingly, affordability is the main driver, followed by quality of life.
Are these prices, are these something that will be sustainable, or is this going to be a boom and then a bust that we're going to see here?
So looking at what's driving this, and to me, demographics have a really heavy thumbprint on this. I see this continuing. Why? We're just entering the peak of the millennial generation. And so from my perspective, I see this demand continuing. If anything, we can safely accelerate construction just to make up for the shortage before we ever have to really worry about being overbuilt. The one thing I'll point out, and that's beginning to show up in our weekly data, we're seeing the overheated price growth beginning to moderate as we move into the summer months, and a lot more homeowners are choosing to list their homes. I think this is going to provide some relief for a lot of frustrated buyers, and at the same time, we'll see some churn in the rental market. So I think renters are looking at some opportunities in the next few months.
And prices are up, but borrowing rates remain at historic lows. Are prospective homeowners able to find and afford the finance that they need in this market?
For many homeowners, the current market is beginning to be challenging. When you look at mortgage rates this week, they crossed the 3% threshold again on their way up. Also, the Federal Reserve mentioned that they are looking to start cutting back on their monetary easing, including their purchases of mortgage-backed securities, all of which will actually translate into higher mortgage rates. So when you look at these steep prices combined with rising rates, it's obvious that for many buyers, affordability will be front and center in 2021.
Geoff Ratiu, Realtor.com, thank you for joining us and giving us some insight this morning.
Great to be here with you.
All right, and we'll be right back. Big thanks to Mississippi Today's Geoff Pender and George Ratiu from Realtor.com. We'll be back next weekend with more of the political and current affairs coverage that you demand. I'm Byron Brown. From all of us here at 12 News, make it a great weekend.